There are a lot of questions about where the U.S. economy stands at the moment. There's a debate between austerity and stimulus, whether we're in an inflationary or deflationary climate, what the Fed should do next, and what exactly is the risk of the U.S. falling into a double-dip recession. We're going to be joined right now by Vincent Reinhart. Ask him to weigh in on all of it. It's a tall order this morning, Vincent. He is with the American Enterprise Institute, a former Federal Reserve Director of Monetary Affairs. He's with us from Washington. Vincent, always glad to have you on with us. Jobs data this Friday, clearly Wall Street's focus. I'm just interested, are you as divided by the dialogue about where the U.S. economy stands, or is it clear to you?
No, I think it's pretty clear that we're in a subpar recovery. The plain fact is that in the aftermath of severe financial crises, economies tend to be a little sluggish in coming back. And in that environment, the unemployment rate stays high. And if anything, there's downward pressure on inflation. We're following that script.
So I want to get back to this idea of the inflationary pressures, but I want to direct you first. We heard from the former Fed chief, Alan Greenspan, basically warning of a double dip if housing doesn't improve. We've heard from St. Louis Fed Reserve President James Bullard saying the central bank should resume purchases of treasuries. There are other big voices out there, Vincent, who seem to be very concerned about the direction we're going in.
Yeah. Now, in those two cases, they're talking about two completely different worldviews, by the way. But I think what Chairman Greenspan was basically conveying is when the economy grows close to its capacity or a little below, it's flying close to stall speed, and you're more vulnerable to shocks. Basically, if you're flying the plane closer to the ground, bad things can happen to you, and that's the situation we're in. It's tough to actually predict a recession. Those tend to be nonlinear events. Those tend to be caused by shocks of one form or another. But the basic message is if spending is only growing sluggishly and the unemployment rate is high, then bad things can happen.
Well, what about this idea of the balance sheet, Vincent? You said yourself needs to be more in play. I mean, should the Fed be considering seriously a second round of quantitative easing?
Oh, I think they're going to have to go that way. They're going to have to go that way for a couple of reasons. One is an unemployment rate of 9.5% tests lots of business models, including the balance sheets of financial institutions and households. And so as long as the unemployment rate stays so high, we will be more vulnerable to shocks. We will be more vulnerable to declines in inflation. Luckily, right now, inflation expectations have been pretty well anchored. We haven't gotten much disinflation. But the Fed's going to have to move. It's also going to have to move.
Vincent, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but if your best guess, not when it will happen, just your best guess.
In the fall, that is September, November. Why? We're getting a new crew on the Board of Governors. The cast is changing a little bit. They're going to be a little more dovish. That'll tip the balance.
Before we let you go, Vincent, I have to ask you about reinvesting mortgage money. Does it happen? Does it not? And when, if it does?
That's very high on the list because, among other things, the Fed can sell it as basically saying no new policy accommodation, just an attempt to keep the balance sheet as big as it currently is. So I think it's pretty high on the list right after tinkering with the language.
Vincent, thanks as always. Vincent Reinhart joining us there from the American Enterprise Institute. He was joining us there from Washington, D.C.